So, fix the money. We're back again, Nico. How you been?
I'm very well, Yael. How are you?
Pretty good. You've been very busy doing a lot of interviews. You've been doing some traveling, family time, and we are united once more. There's nothing going on in the news, right? Nothing that's been impacting
It's
Bitcoin
Monday.
or anything else, eh?
It is Monday morning. I haven't actually checked the news and I haven't actually checked Twitter today, so I don't know. But I do want to talk about Emmanuel Macron and the Europeans today after we go through the other recent events on the Substack.
Yes. So we want to go over to fixthemoney.net. That's where we've been publishing a lot of great articles and content lately, podcasts. Try to do a newsletter and a podcast every single week. So we've got a couple of them. Man, I don't know the last time we summarized this stuff. I guess we can talk about value for value, or we can talk about Mr. Mangold or Peter Saint-Onge. Where would you like to go?
So I think we just, the podcast episodes, everybody can listen to them. We did talk to Peter. I did talk to Peter about Europe and the euro and the dollar and dollar hegemony and this kind of stuff that everybody's now talking about. I've been on this topic for about 10 years, I think, and I know that it's always the same story. It's always the story with the dollar is basically done, and then everybody says no, it's not, and then and everybody's right. In the long run, yes, it is done, but in the short run, it's obviously not. Yeah. But I do think that the European part is a bit misunderstood, and that's what we want to talk about today. First, yes, I mean. The last, maybe European part. The last article I did was on Ijoma Mangold. He's a German author, and I wrote about how he's going to be the perfect man to basically orange pill the nation of Germany, because he's not a hardcore libertarian meme lord. He's a well-respected author, basically, well, not from the left, but he talks to the left, and he's comes from Die Zeit, which is the Time translated. Which is a very, Americans would call it liberal paper, right? Their economic section is basically MMT. Oh, wow. But he's not from the economic section. He's from the feuilleton, the culture section.
Yeah, I like that. When it seems as if he's if we were to reimagine it, a kind of Stefan Zweig of yesterday, who is now into Bitcoin. I think that's really interesting. To have someone from the literature world, which... This is something that a lot of Bitcoiners have struggled with, is ways to reach out to people in the arts who tend to be on the left, people who come from the creative backgrounds. It's always the technical guys, it's the nerds, it's the money people, it's, as you mentioned, classical liberals or libertarians, it's a lot of economists, a lot of computer scientists, hackers, and now to have someone who's actually from the world of literature and language and can actually... He knows how to massage words in a way that many technical people just can't. You think that is a good avenue for a next level orange pilling of the Deutsche Volk?
I think it's important. You don't say that.
Can't say that. Okay.
I think it's important to understand that in the German media, well, first of all, you don't really say things straight out like you do in the American media, and then there's not a focus on economic issues basically at all. Now with the inflation, this changes a little bit, but it's mostly politics and virtue signaling, and especially when you go to Germany has a very strong public sector media, especially when it comes to talk shows and the like. So he's going to be excellent for that. I think he's going to be excellent in these talk shows that older people are still watching. Yeah. And also the book readers. This is his third book, so he has fans, right? He has people who are waiting for his book and who are going to read anything he's writing. And his story is very familiar to Bitcoiners around the world. He just spent too many hours listening to Bitcoin podcasts while doing gardening work during lockdown, and that's how he got into Bitcoin. But I talked to him on my German channel twice, and his story is his family migrated from Nigeria, or at least half his family. So he has this whole his name, Ijoma. He's half black. He's not the typical German. which also, you know, protects him from the most vicious attacks within the mainstream media, obviously.
So you mentioned that he had been seeing some attacks. Was it based on getting into Bitcoin or other things, or what is that?
He gets attacked in the media because he comes from the media and he speaks to the public, right? He speaks to a part of the public that the media thinks they have covered. So he gets attacked from the left, basically, mostly, and then there's all the other mainstream outlets. But there's also a lot of people who think what he's doing is great, and I'm getting messages from German Bitcoiners who go to like the bookstore, and then the lady there would tell him, yeah, we got the book, everybody bought the book, and we're talking about the book in our ladies book circle, you know. My wife is reading the book. It's the first Bitcoin book she's reading, right?
Wow.
So that's why I think he's going to be great for you know, I mean, I don't like the term orange pilling, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course. Orange pilling. So that is on fixthemoney.net. Meet the man who will introduce Bitcoin to the German mainstream. And definitely I've seen a lot of interest from a lot of the German and Austrian plebs online who've been sharing this and are very excited. So that is good. In terms of, I had an article on value for value.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah. So
that's more the technical side, right?
This is a bit more the technical side, but a cool innovation that's happening thanks to the Lightning Network. So those of you who are listening to Fix the Money on your modern podcast apps have been sending boosts. I know, Nico, you've been getting boosts for Was Bitcoin Bringt. You've been getting sats, messages, people who are loving the interviews. This is kind of only one element of value for value. And the article just kind of details some of the tools, some of the apps people are using, and where it could be useful, because it's obviously very insular right now to podcasting. And it's like, well, okay, great. I don't have my own podcast just yet. I'm not like every other Joe Schmo. However, value for value means anything. And Gigi is very good on this. If you have a service or a product, you're able to offer that for sats. I think I wrote you, we're trying to find a farmer who's going to offer us some great meat. And
so how's that going? How's that going?
It's good. So a lot of people who are farmers who are selling their own meat direct to consumer, they tend to be very skeptical of, you know, traditional banking systems anyway. Yeah. So you have an avenue. It's just about getting them to understand Bitcoin, and then more so Lightning and how to use apps. I think that's the whole thing, because it's one thing to get someone on board theoretically. It's another to get them using the tools.
The thing is that I always see the same thing. If I talk to farmers, you know, so I would go to the countryside with my family, right? And you book something on Airbnb, and then you would get like a small hut on some farm where they make some money on the side, right? And then you talk to them, and then you talk about, you know, because they all have you know, solar power, right? Because you get all kinds of money for putting that up. You have some solar panels there, and you ask them, you know, where the power goes when they don't need the power, right? And they sell it to the grid.
Yeah.
And of course they get a shit price, right? And then you tell them, you know, how you could mine Bitcoin. And that's the beautiful thing about people who work, you know, with the soil, right? And with the seasons, and they understand immediately. They don't need to read 7 books and like a thesis or whatever.
And they're not deterred by a New York Times hit piece article.
They do not give a shit about the New York Times hit piece article. Actually, yeah, and they realize this immediately. So, and I have this theory that this is actually something that you see everywhere in Bitcoin. That people like the tradesmen, the people who work with their hands, work with a connection to real stuff, that they actually get it quicker. And I said this on one of my German podcasts, and I did a shout out to everybody who's listening to this while, you know, plowing the field and working on the machine, and I got so many like messages back saying, hey, hi from the field. So it might be true. It's, of course, it's just anecdotal evidence, but back to value for value. So I think, you know, once you start, you realize how well this works, basically.
Yeah, and you can do it for absolutely anything. And what Bitcoin allows you to do, and you can do it as easily as just getting a Lightning address, is putting that on anything that you put out into the world. And if you happen to have a craft, a skill, if you have a product, if you have something that you put out there into the ether, and people find value in that, they can send you value back. So it's worked a lot for podcasting. We have not yet reached the tip of the podcasting top 10 in terms of sats earned, but thankfully, we've got some people who have been boosting and will send messages and everything else. But it also comes down to, other media. You have music as well. And I've been messing around with the music stuff. My friend's band in North Carolina, putting his album out on the Lightning Network to where people can send sats to it. People can send boostograms. I mean, it's all just starting, and this is all just protocol level with crappy looking HTML websites. We just have to imagine what it'll look like once it's an app, something that looks beautiful.
So from the broader economic perspective, I have to say that what I see here is basically just the market, giving the finger to all the AML, KYC, bureaucracy, and the craziness that's going on, and just finding new avenues for creators, because you have this situation where anybody in the world with an internet connection can now do stuff, but the money is lacking, right? And I mean, we don't have to talk about how Bitcoin is going to fix the world immediately, but in this scenario, I think it's very clear to see that and it's not just about making money immediately. It's basically about seeing that there could be something there, that there is, because there's a whole different motivational level when you get feedback. And I see this on YouTube. When we get comments on YouTube, it immediately boosts your confidence. So I think this is gonna go far, because basically we're sitting here in Vienna, Austria right now, and we of course doing everything by the book, but we could be sitting in on some island in the South Pacific, sipping cocktails and talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah,
and it will probably be cheaper and warmer. But so
it's getting there, and I think it removes the gatekeepers. That's the most important part, because the enemy, so-called, is not necessarily just the government. It's also corporations, it's middle managers, it's all the different layers. And artists know that specifically. They have to have a booker, they have to have a manager, they have to pay Spotify X amount, and they get 5 cents or 1 cent per play. And there's all these different layers that are between your audience and you, your customers and you. And I think that's why this direct-to-consumer, whilst we've never had the ability to scale, that's something that Bitcoin and Lightning specifically help do. So that's at least one thing I'm very bullish on. I want to see that a lot more. I mean, I've given out the recommendation for my barber in Vienna who accepts Bitcoin now to a couple people, and I'm happy to do that more and more. But at some point, all the barbers will accept Bitcoin. Every sort of farmer who wants to sell their meat will be accepting Bitcoin. There'll be all of these different layers of our society and economic actors that will do it, and it'll be to their advantage, and it'll be to our advantage. Free exchange.
Exactly, and you have to wait also for the next generation, right? Maybe the old farmer doesn't want the Bitcoin, but his son does, right?
Yeah.
Or his daughter.
Yeah.
And we have very good meat here in Austria.
Very true. Yeah, I mean that's why the McDonald's isn't like half bad. Promo code for McDonald's, by the way. No, we don't have that. So let's go to. So we have some of the interviews as well. You mentioned talking to Peter St. Onge, and you talked to Knut about
van Holm.
Yeah, why Bitcoin will win. I think there's a lot of good energy there, very positive vibes.
Knut is amazing. You have to listen to the interview if you haven't yet.
It's very good.
The good thing about interviewing people is if I'm in a good mood, then it's gonna work. Because the people in Bitcoin, especially people like Knut, they always have something interesting to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and the interview with Peter St. Onge, it was also very interesting because he's basically come onto the scene right now, and he's now publishing a video once a day on YouTube and Twitter, and he has let's say what I've seen with him, and I mean he's probably right, but his views, of course, like any American economist, are very American-centric, if that's a word, and that's not
Amerocentric is the term I use.
Amerocentric, but that's not like that does not it's not special to him. It's what you see all the time. I mean, you can probably find you can probably find economists in the US who will be surprised when you tell them that the euro is still a thing, right? It's in 2012 when the euro crisis hit us, 2010 to 2012. Many American economists would say, okay, that's it, that's done, the euro's done for, you know. And now we have entered a second strange phase for the euro, which means it's not done for. It's still growing when it comes to the size of the number of countries that are in it. Croatia just joined the euro, but at the same time, with the censoring of the Russian currency reserves, the euro is now basically a dollar 2.0. It's a Western currency. You see not only Russia, but basically the whole Eastern Bloc, let's call it, is not only de-dollarizing, it's also de-euronizing, which of course is not the idea. The idea of the euro was always for them to use the euro when they want to get rid of the dollar. And China and Russia actually did a huge deal on gas deliveries, and they did that during the Olympics, shortly before the invasion of the Ukraine, and the currency they would use was to be the euro. I think it was a signal. It was a signal to Europe, go with us. Now they switched to rubles and yuan, and Russia is in the process of kicking out the euro from their sovereign wealth fund, their currency reserves, and any usage. This, of course, brings us to the next phase, which I think Emmanuel Macron has started now, the French president, when he went to China. And after spending 6 hours with Chairman Xi, he went on a plane and talked to Politico, which is owned by a German, Axel Springer, which is owned by a German a company that is extremely pro-American, right? Axel Springer has, there's no doubt there, right? And he talked about how Europe needs autonomy, strategic autonomy from the US, how Europe needs to find their own way. And then 2 days later, he would do a speech about European sovereignty in Den Haag, I think. So that's the capital of the Netherlands. It's not Amsterdam. And he talked about the same thing, right? And it was interesting to see how this story was covered in European media, because it wasn't, because there were hecklers who came on who disturbed the
okay, and that was about the pension protest.
It was exactly,
yeah.
because right now Emmanuel Macron is trying to get a reform through in France for the pension system, because like every pension system in the world, the French pension system is totally fucked, and they want to raise the retirement age, which is the most logical thing to do, and we should do the same thing here in Austria. But of course, the French saw it as an opportunity to go and strike again. and protest. You probably know more than I do because you speak French. I don't.
I think what has really been the whole point of Macron's rise and ascension, and there's always this parallel to Louis XIV, the Sunshine King, and there's always this idea that here comes Macron. He doesn't have a party. He used to hang out a little bit with the socialists, but he has En Marche. He's his own political party. It's just him. He's going to bring this kind of breath of fresh air. He's talking about reform, liberalizing stuff, more free trade. This was the Macron that was promised 6 years ago. And then within about a year, he was already mired in all kinds of things. There were crises happening left and right. And those plans kind of went by the wayside. And
so just like Obama, basically.
It's similar. And I think now, nearing his term, he has to figure out, how do these numbers make sense? And they don't. And I think they haven't made sense in France for a really long time. You have a lot of workers who work for the state. You have a lot of money that goes directly into, basically bureaucracy. And by raising the retirement age, that's just like one small step you can make. France has a big protest culture. Anything that governments do that they want to oppose, they take to the streets, voice it. Anybody who's been to France or tried to go through Charles de Gaulle Airport in the last couple of years probably knows there's a strike every day. And it's just Macron who's feeling this heat at home, which makes it all the more interesting that he would start speaking of these large seismic shifts in geopolitics and alliances at that exact moment. I don't know why now is the time. Could it be that a lot of French firms are seeing the impact of Russian sanctions?
So I think
that could be one thing.
I think that I think you really have to divorce the whole politics at home from the big picture. I think saying that, of course, he's going to talk about Europe right now because he is in trouble at home. He just wants to divert from that. I think it's lazy. It's lazy. It's a lazy way to analyze this stuff because it's not like anybody in France who is on strike now, sees the speech about European sovereignty and says, "Oh, right, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to work longer and do what he tells me to do." Right? No. That's not how it works. So I think that first of all, he was clearly under the impression of the China trip, right? He did bring, I think, more than a dozen of CEOs from French companies. There were huge deals being made. China still, delivers a lot of money, right? And that's one thing. And the second thing is that he was. I think it's important for our American audience to understand that Europe is a lot harder to understand also than the US. It's not just that there is so many countries, but you also have to see what country does what country is important for what, right? And France has a very specific role within the European system. And their role is not to be economically successful. That's the role of the Germans, right? That the French role is politics. Power politics and military politics. So what do I mean by that? So the French can do stuff that the Germans can't because the French are not the Germans, right? They don't have the Nazi history. They can basically be French and European at the same time, where the Germans, they cannot be really they can't be really German on the world stage, and they also cannot be like the leader of Europe because nobody wants to follow them. So the French can do this, right? And they also have an important military role because they're the only one who have the bomb, especially after the UK left. So it's the only one they are basically the European bomb, right? And Macron has been the only one of the Western European leaders who has been very consistent with saying, we need to talk to Russia at some point, yeah. I mean, it's logical, but he was the only one who actually would go as far as saying this. And now he went to China, and I think he's realized that I think what he said that if there's going to be a big conflict between the US and China, Europe has to be careful not to be a vassal. And of course, he was talking about a vassal of the US.
Yeah.
Europe wants to be the third superpower, which is also what the euro, the currency, was supposed to be. And I think he's right. I don't know if we're ever going to get there, and if we have to decide if we are going to be somebody's vessel, I'm always going to go with the US and not China. But the thing is that economically we're not totally Western. We're not totally just in the American sphere of influence. So I think he's right, and I think he realized that he needs to be the guy who does that because nobody else is gonna do it. And it's also interesting to see that he went to China with Ursula von der Leyen. So Ursula von der Leyen, she's nobody likes Ursula von der Leyen in Germany. She's the president of European Commission. So 3 days before she would go to China, there would be a story in the Sun, in the Murdoch paper, that she's going to be the next general secretary of NATO. So when I read this, my first thought was she's done. Right, so she's going to, because now that she's been stamped the NATO, if she goes to China, nobody takes her seriously as a European representative, only as a NATO representative, right? And the second thing is that my second thought was actually Angela Merkel is going to come back. That's
Okay.
that's my conspiracy theory head right here. But
You're on the Merkel comeback train.
I'm not on the comeback train. But I think that when you look at the story, I mean Merkel, she's also not very well liked in the U.S. because in Germany because she's done things like the refugee crisis, like shutting down the nuclear reactors, which was a bit stupid idea. So
Well, they just shut them down again.
yeah, I don't know
So,
how.
is it really that popular or anti? I don't know.
Nobody knows. I mean, we
All
should
right,
do a
well,
whole.
some thoughts on the
We should
Macron
do a whole
thing.
episode about Germany.
So the thing about
once Germany snaps, things are going to go very quickly. But that's a whole other story.
So about Macron, I mean, I'd agree with many parts of that, and the simmering sort of domestic crisis at home is just par for the course. It's just normal France, right? It's just something that happens every couple of years. You always have these kind of issues, and France is interesting in that it also has not just this kind of more playing politics and military, but they also have overseas territory.
Yes.
They also have huge influence in Africa. If we listen to Meloni from Italy's, comments about Macron in France, they have a lot of resource contracts in Africa that allow them to power their nuclear reactors. They have a lot of these contracts and connections that allow them to be more powerful and sort of step above the European fray.
I think it's important. To
Yeah.
add that Meloni, who is the Italian prime minister, right, and she's a fascist, bona fide fascist. Has been a fascist all her year. She's hardcore. But the thing is
Fascist who likes Ukraine, by the way.
well, this is not a podcast about the Ukraine. But the thing is, I just wanted to add, I didn't want to disturb your thought, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to add, she specifically said that Italy apparently had contracts lined up with Gaddafi's Libya, or was it Tunisia? I think it might have been Tunisia. I think it was Tunisia. And then the French intervened in Tunisia to fuck it all up. So she has a huge chip on her shoulder about the French
Oh, yeah.
influence in Africa, because the Italian influence is probably non-existent.
Well, they not anymore. No, they've basically gotten rid of it. And Libya was like a big foothold for them. But then when you look at Niger and you look at Mali, France has active troops there. They have active military bases there. They have active contracts. They have, Macron comes every now and then and talks to the president. But a lot of these countries, are themselves subdued to France because of what? The colonial franc.
The colonial franc, yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff that I know we could talk to about that. But
I have to say, I mean, I've been dealing with the whole euro monetary stuff for over a decade, and I never heard of the colonial franc before Alex Gladstein did his stories about it.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's been a couple of people across Africa that I've talked to who, for them, they live monetary crisis every day. For us, it's sort of like this philosophical experiment of like, oh, what could happen here? Or maybe you have something in Cyprus where they cap, how much money you can take out of the ATM. But, this is something they live through all the time. And they have to constantly think about monetary competition. They have to constantly think about what's going to hold value longer. What can I use? What can I send? If I have friends and family abroad, what can I actually use without getting dinged or without getting put on a list? I mean, there's all these different things. And France is kind of this strange overlord in those situations. So that's one element. And then you've got the stuff at home. What I think is more interesting is that the entire reason Europe works as a social welfare system is because there are American troops, because there is NATO that guard this continent. That allows most of these countries to underspend on military and defense and to spend way more on social programs. That's the bargain that has allowed Europe to have these amazing welfare states. Yet you have basically your U.S. troops or NATO troops generally that provide protection. Marco Rubio, when he heard Macron's comments, said, well, what's it going to be, Macron? Are you going to be with us or are you going to be with them? Are we going to take our troops out or what?
But that's exactly, now we're really getting to the gist of it, because of course Macron knows that the US is not just going to pull the troops out.
Well, they have their own reasons for being there.
Exactly,
yes, yeah.
exactly. It's not like the US is in Europe and is protecting Europe just out of the goodness of their heart, right? if the US, I mean, in a very very theoretical scenario where the EU would work with Russia and China, but not the US on the political sphere, that's very very bad for the US. It's not. I mean, because we can go into the whole heartland theory and Brzezinski and whatever, but basically, you don't want to lose Eurasia, and you don't want to lose Europe specifically, because there is still money to be made here, and there's still some kind of future for Europe, I think. And you see that I think you see with the euro, you see that Americans do understand that the Europeans want to get out of their, they don't want to get out of the American sphere of influence. I think that would be too far, but they want to do their dependence. They want to do their own thing, right? They want to do their own thing. And when you look back at 2010, 2012, during the Greek crisis and the euro crisis, the European sovereign debt crisis, right? European politicians would complain about American ratings agencies all the time, which was basically a code for, Washington is fucking with us. Yeah. And they were, but at the same time, you also have the problem that you don't want to get too close with the Chinese, because that's also not an option. It's not helpful at all. I mean, they are not, I don't think you get anything for free from the Americans, but I think it's going to be always cheaper than from the Chinese.
Well, the Americans allow you to do business, hire your own people, build infrastructure, and to get wealthy. The Chinese send in their own people. You always have to sign over your intellectual property rights, which many different companies have now learned after many years, that you always have to partner with a local company. There's always got to be a CCP guy who's on the board of this new consortium. So there's a level of control that just does not exist between the liberal democracies.
Yes, but of course we do have our own, socialist, centralized states in Brussels. And of course there are people there who want a system like China.
100%.
So that's the next thing. So you have many different factions, right? You have the nationalistic factions, and they are divided between each other, and then you have the big countries like Germany and France who are doing their own thing, Italy especially, and then or Poland, right? And I personally, my love goes out to Eastern Europe, because they are going to be the ones to protect us from going too far down the road to communism, basically. I hope, but so there are people in Brussels who want to go down the route of China with the social credit system and the CBDC and the control. But I don't know how far you can go this way within Europe. It's hard to say. And what I also don't know is what's Germany gonna do? Because Germany is very very hard to read right now. It's I don't have a grip on Scholz so far. So Angela Merkel, because the thing with Germany is it's against their nature. They're actually very direct people normally, but in politics they never go out and state anything directly because of their history, and they don't want to be the bad Germans, right? So Angela Merkel was really an interesting figure, because on the world stage I think that she did a couple of smart things, maybe a couple of dumb things, but she guaranteed this, basically what Macron was talking about. She actually guaranteed this strategic autonomy from the East and the West for Europe, and she tried to play both sides, and she succeeded. She succeeded. Because you can see how she succeeded, because as soon as she was out of office, everything just broke down, right? Nord Stream gets bombed. The thing is with Nord Stream so before Angela Merkel you had Gerhard Schröder, who was from the socialists, and then Angela Merkel comes in from the conservatives, right? Of course, conservatives with quotes, because she grew up in communism, but she So he would do that. Like the last thing he would do as chancellor was signing the Nord Stream 1 contract, right? Because he was afraid that she would not go through with it. Not only did she go through with it, she doubled down on Russian on dependency on Russia. Even when you look at the nuclear stuff, right? So why did she shut down the nuclear stuff? Maybe she shut down the nuclear stuff to actually enhance the dependency on Russian gas. Right? And now what are they doing? It's completely insane what's happening right now.
They're just cutting themselves off from all energy.
They are cutting themselves off from all energy. They are basically going back to 1930s style German. The Germans under the Nazis would find a way to make synthetic oil out of coal, right? Because they were cut off from the oil markets. So coal is the only thing that the Germans still have, and they still have a lot of coal. Mm-hmm. They can power. They have gas too, by the way. Austria also has gas. We have enough gas for 20 to 30 years.
Oh yeah.
But we are too good to just go and get it. Tell anybody in Austria we're going to do fracking, and they think the world's going to end.
Well, there are, like when you travel to Niederösterreich, there are plenty of places where you see like natural gas taps, so they have this stuff everywhere. And one interesting thing with Austria, and particularly the Soviet Union, is whenever the Soviet Union negotiated and allowed Austria to be neutral, if you actually read the agreement, half of it is just about oil and coal. It's only about energy. It has nothing to do with like the political boundaries or whatever. It's just about the energy, and you'll guarantee X price for the Soviet Union for X amount of time. Like it all comes down to the oil, baby. And that was back in 1955. So I can only imagine with Germany and the levels. I mean, you cannot. My colleagues and I have been trying to research how much money the Russians have put into the German environmentalism groups to basically protest against any domestic production of energy in Germany, whether that be natural gas, fracking, or nuclear. You can find some of those connections, but it's pretty clear for a long time it was at Russia's advantage. I have no idea whose advantage, is at play here right now. If you get rid of nuclear, it's just the coal miners, I guess.
Exactly.
Or it's the Indians, because that's where everybody's getting their energy now, because from Russia to via India.
The Indians get a good price for stamping their stamp of Indian approval onto the Russian oil stuff. No, I mean the German public discourse right now is completely insane, because all they talk about is climate. How to introduce more socialism to fight the climate. That meme, right? From Greta Thunberg. It means where the weather is your fault, the solution is always communism.
Yeah, basically.
But so that's all they talk about. They are completely obsessed with climate policies. Of course,
and Macron too, by the way. I don't mean to interrupt, but Macron also mentioned in his speech in Den Haag, like, we want to be free to create our own agreements that do focus on the climate.
I think it
seems like a control. It seems like a control thing, right? I don't think he really cares, but
so I think that as a European politician, you should care about the climate issue in a way where you use it to further energy autonomy. I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing to invest into renewable energy, right? I mean, Austria gets most of its power from renewable energy. And why does Austria get most of its power from renewable energy? You know the story? Why do we have so much hydro energy in Austria? Because after the war we would buy most of our energy in Switzerland and Germany, and then the Austrian government would say, well, that's a stupid idea, because we don't want to be dependent on them, so we build a lot of dams. We have lots of water, we build a lot of dams, and we have hydro energy, And the miner back there that's heating out the apartment here, from an Austrian company, by the way, 21 Energy. It's running on hydro energy. At least that's what I'm telling people on Twitter. They don't. Maybe it might be. It doesn't matter. But the thing is that the German discourse is completely insane. The French discourse. I mean, they just shut down the nuclear, right? At the same time, the Finnish government is building more nuclear power plants and celebrating it because it's good for the climate.
Yeah.
The French are, of course, very, very deeply into nuclear because that's one of the technologies they actually export. So they are never going to get out of nuclear. We don't here in Austria. Don't have nuclear for another reason. It's a long story.
It was a referendum. Yeah.
There was it's actually not that long. So we built a nuclear power plant, and then we had a referendum afterwards, and people said no, we don't want it. And then now we have this nuclear power plant that's it's used for movies, but it was never used as a nuclear power plant. So that's the story. I think Macron is trying to at least open the dialogue and open the discussion in Europe about autonomy from the US. And here's a funny thing. Yes, you said that it's true that we depend on the US for protection. It's true that the US is a European country culturally still, right? I mean, it's Europeans who went there and built the country. It's also true that we are probably better off with the US in the long run if we had to decide. But the problem is that politics in Europe is so toxic, and the discourse in the mainstream media is so far gone. People. The amount of people who would believe anything that's just not the mainstream is growing exponentially.
Sure.
And of course, Russia is using that. I think that it's true that there is like Russian disinformation. It happens, yes. But I think that they don't have to do a lot of things because they just have to be there and wait for people to be fed up with the European system, because the European media environment is completely catastrophic. And I can see the differences even between Austria and Germany, because Austria is not in NATO. So we are a bit.
Not yet.
No, we're not going to go to.
No, there are a couple of proposals now from NEOS and some of the other parties to open discussions on joining NATO.
It's not happening.
Okay.
It goes back to the contracts, right? It goes back to
1955.
And also nobody's interested in Austria joining NATO because they need Vienna to send their spies to talk to other spies.
Yeah.
And this has been I mean, all the good spies are here. There's even there was even the show with the Netflix show, right?
Yeah. The Agent or something like this.
The Recruit.
The Recruit. Yeah. I mean, look, all of this, you mentioned the different interests in Europe, and that's something that's very hard to convey to an American audience, is that it's not just Macron and then it's like all the other leaders and they sit down in a room and they decide and that's what Europe is. There are actual institutions with thousands of Eurocrats who have all these different interests always competing. So you have the Commission, you have the Council, you have the Court of Justice, you have all these different people trying to speak for Europe at once, and then you have Christine Lagarde, who ECB, they have their own thing. And you can see, I think what you mentioned, like the people who like Maoism, who like this China model, a lot of them are in the Commission.
Yes.
There's a lot of people there.
Well, it's called the Commission. They are commissars.
Commissars.
It's literally, I mean, it's literally so.
But they're the ones who banned, by the way, the ability for you to use your Apple Lightning charger. That's the European Commission. They made a rule that all phone chargers must only be USB-C from now on.
But I still have a Lightning charger.
Now. But they can't sell it anymore.
Yeah, but that's the thing, and that's also the thing with the European Commission, even with the EU. And so it's always harder to see like the gray areas, right? But of course, that's how life is. It's not black and white, and it's not red and blue. It's gray or purple or whatever. So what I mean is, yes, it's stupid, yeah, but at the same time, one thing they did is get rid of roaming, by the way, so that I can go to the Czech Republic or I can go to Germany.
Goodness. Nico, do I need to give you the Austrian economist example of why the free roaming plan sucks? It made everybody's domestic internet more expensive. You know that.
Maybe, but whatever. What I'm trying to say is it's not only bad. Saying it's only bad, I think, would be stupid.
It's not only bad. It's that there's a lot of competing interests, and sometimes people win that are in some, different political group, and sometimes they lose.
And also,
depends on the constituents.
And it's also important to see that even if you get bored by it, people get bored by peace. So what I'm saying is that European nationalism is one of the most horrible sources of violence and death in the history of the world. And when you look at these constructs disintegrating, like in Yugoslavia, war breaks out. In that regard, actually, the end of the Soviet Union was pretty well managed, to be honest, because I don't know why. It's a different story, but. And with Europe, I don't think that if the EU would end it, European nations would immediately go to war with each other, because we still have our national institutions. We did not give everything to Europe. It may look like that for some people, but it's not actually true. What is true is that there is some sort of there's always one country more important than the other in the time frame. So right now, I think France is very important for the politics, and I think Poland is going to be super important. And Poland, of course, is going to be super hardcore in the anti-Russian America camp, right? Which is fine. I totally understand that. I mean, if you look into the history of Europe, it's a wonder Poland even exists, right? Yeah. And they had their they are basically still surrounded by historical enemies. So I totally get that. But at the same time, I think it's a good thing to have that voice as well, and have maybe, like, if you count Italy as a big country, a fourth big country in the European Union. I don't think the EU will dissolve anytime soon. I don't think that the euro will dissolve. But we're going to enter a very interesting phase where we have to look at what's happening, right? And I think that this whole push to a more multipolar world, where China uses their currency and the Russians use their currency, and they start, they actually use the China interbank payment system instead of SWIFT and all that stuff. Of course, Europe needs to also be part of that. We cannot just rely on the Americans forever.
No, or they can rely on Bitcoin.
I almost forgot that this is a Bitcoin podcast. Yes, of course. Bitcoin would be the solution.
It provides the independent path to where you don't have to be reliant on any of those, at least monetarily. You might have to when it comes to military or politics, but it denationalizes that aspect of the money.
Interestingly, that's what happened with the euro, right? So go to any government and say, how about this? You lose your power to print money. We give it to some supranational institution. That's the European Central Bank, right? And the idea was to have a more neutral money that is not beholden to one state, that does not have the Triffin dilemma, right? Yeah. Basically, and that's why I will have a soft spot for the euro. Basically, the idea was, and this is before Bitcoin, right? Basically, the idea was to have a state money, but that is not a government money, and a money that focuses solely, and I know it sounds stupid today because the inflation is crazy, that focuses solely on the price stability, and also money that basically, when I think it was Connolly, the finance minister, who said the dollar is our money, but it's your problem. It's our currency, but it's your problem. The idea was to have a currency that's our currency and also our problem, but to provide it for the world, to have an alternative to the dollar. And the euro is the only currency so far that has come close to competing to the dollar as a world payment currency, as a world reserve currency. And of course, the Americans hate it. They might warm up to the idea now because now the euro is hardcore into the camp of the Americans. I mean, Lagarde. I don't know.
I mean, the bans on cash and CBDC plans. I mean, basically any of the transactions that I've done in the past few months would have been illegal. Paying my movers, You know, all of that with cash, can't do it, illegal.
Sure, I mean, if you want to go down the route to the road to serfdom, I mean, the ECB is going to be game, right? And Lagarde is going to be game. And I'm not saying that this is not a problem. I'm just talking about the idea that that was originally behind the euro.
Sure.
And of course, yes, Bitcoin does it better, you know? Bitcoin does it better than the euro. Bitcoin does it better than the Bancor or any other stupid international currency thingy that anybody dreams up, right? And
the BRICS currency coming up.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
That's a whole other episode.
I mean, yes. Let's talk about the BRICS and.
We'll get that another time.
Yes, because I think we have to wrap it up here.
It's been good catching up, and again, we invite everybody listening to head on over to fixthemoney.net. We got plenty of content, articles, videos, interviews. I think you're busy the next couple of weeks. I'm busy the next couple of weeks, so who knows what kind of magic will be found online. And because it's fixthemoney.net, I think it's not blocked on Twitter by Elon's team.
I think a Substack is also not blocked anymore. I think that's
okay. They removed it.
But
okay,
did you see that Substack actually removed the option to tweet out directly when you publish a story immediately?
Oh no, I didn't see that. Okay, well, there we go. The wars on social media and online stuff is good.
And if you want to get one of those sweet sweaters that Yael is wearing that says "Fix the Money," you go to satoshistore.io and you can use the code "Fix the Money" to get 5% off on the whole collection. And I'll put the links into the show notes, obviously.
Gotta push the merch. Very good. Well, cool. Thanks for boosting. Thanks for being here, everybody. And Nico, let's catch up soon.
It was good to talk to you. See you next time.
For more content, podcasts, and articles like this, visit fixthemoney.substack.com.